I found unreleased footage of my very first barbecue cookout, and it is bad. I'm not kidding when I say this, but this single mistake right here has completely ruined the cook. There is a 0% chance of success rate at this point. So I thought it'd be fun to watch it with you guys and give my feedback so we can all learn something from it. Today what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be cooking 2 racks of spare ribs and 1 rack of baby back, and then I'm going to try and cook chicken. Okay, so off the bat, ribs and chicken is not a bad idea to do for a first cook. A lot of people, myself included, say you should probably start with a pork butt, but ribs and chicken is also a good choice because of the high fat content, and most importantly, ribs and chicken are fairly cheap, especially if you're comparing it to like a brisket or something. So I'm pretty much following Mad Scientist Barbecue's methodology of cooking the ribs. So basically what he does is that he cooks it really low at 200 degrees to 225, and then at about 4 hours, that's when you wanna hike up the temperature to 275. Once it's stabilized at 275, I'm gonna put the second rack on the Weber Smoky Mountain and put my chicken on the bottom rack. So I really don't like this plan of attack for how I decided to cook the ribs and chicken. I think that I was really bent on trying to follow Mad Scientist Barbecue's method and didn't really think through if there's a way that I could cook both the chicken and ribs at the same time. Because the Weber Smoky Mountain has 2 levels, you should really take advantage of that, especially if you're trying to cook for like a party or something. Why would you split up the cook? And this is a very common beginner mistake that I see a lot when I'm just chatting with people on YouTube. Basically, you hear your barbecue hero say like, oh, this is the way that I cook ribs, and you put it in your head, okay, this is the only way to cook ribs. So now you're like almost a slave to this recipe that you have to follow, and there's just no wiggle room at all. Cooking this way basically sucks the soul out of barbecue, which in my opinion, I think that barbecue is all about a pit master using all the tools and knowledge that he has to make a barbecue product in the time that he wants and in the style that he wants. If I were to go back in time, I would have cooked the ribs and chicken at about 275 to 300 the whole way through, just get both of them done at the same time. I'm gonna show you guys the layout of the wood. So this is hopefully gonna smolder while the ribs are cooking. And then on the outside of the ring, I have another pecan and apple mix on the outer ring, which will hopefully smolder once I put the chicken on. Oh man. Okay, so that right there is straight up troll physics. The way the Weber Smoky Mountain smokes food is through a process called smoldering, which is basically the burning of wood without flame. And this process happens around the 400 degrees Fahrenheit mark. With that said, since all of the wood chunks are like within inches of each other, if the charcoal basket is hot enough to smolder the center pieces of wood, then most likely the other pieces on the outer ring are also smoldering as well. Even if you're using the minion method by putting the coals directly in the middle, there's still so much radiant heat from that it's going to easily smolder the chunks on the outer ring. So in short, there's absolutely no chance this plan is going to work. Okay, so not the cleanest job on this rack, but you know, a job done nonetheless. Also, give myself a little bit of a cut with my knife, so use a butter knife, pro tip. Whenever you use a knife, never cut towards yourself because you are just asking to cut your hand open. You know what, actually for this baby back, I'm just gonna score it. So I have smoked a few racks of ribs since this time, and I will say that scoring the back of the ribs is kind of my go-to move now because it's just so much work to remove the membrane. You gotta get a paper towel, you gotta get a butter knife. It's just kind of a headache, and at the end of the day, once you're done cooking, I don't really notice much of a difference when I score it versus taking it off. Okay, now that my hands are clean, I'm gonna go ahead and put some rub on these ribs. Wow, that's so weird. It's really weird seeing myself making pre-made seasoning because usually I just put on the seasoning layer by layer. And I highly recommend making small batches of rub for specific pieces of meat or just doing it layer by layer because that way you can control how much salt is going on the meat you're preparing. This one I'm gonna do salt and pepper. These two I'm going to do SPG. And then I'm gonna turn around and do coffee rub on both of these and just leave these with just salt and pepper. So for 2 of the racks of ribs, I'm actually going to do 2 coats of rub, and I know that both of those recipes have salt in them. So if I'm not careful, these are gonna be some really salty ribs. Wow. That is so much salt. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna do 2 coats of this. This is terrible. I'm not kidding when I say this, but this single mistake right here has completely ruined the cook. There is a 0% chance of success rate at this point. Those 2 racks of ribs at the end are gonna be way too salty. Oh man, that is hard to watch. Okay, so I got the Weber Smoky Mountain all put together
It's at 133 right now. Once it's at 200, I'm gonna go ahead and throw the ribs on there. So the pit just came up to temp, so I'm gonna go ahead and put these ribs on. Start with the salt and pepper one.
So something that you have to keep in mind when you're smoking with the Weber Smoky Mountain is that the outer ring of the cooker is a hot spot. So because of the way that I laid out the ribs, the outside ribs are gonna cook a lot faster than the middle ribs. So if you're gonna do 3 racks of ribs in a Weber Smoky Mountain, then you definitely want to make sure that you're rotating the ribs so that they all finish at the exact same time. I know for a fact that I did not do it on this cook.
Hey gang, so I just went and did some errands with a friend, and I left the pit for about an hour, and temps went like way out of control.
Why would you do that? Oh man, there wasn't enough going on. You're working on a short clock. You're cooking meat that you've never cooked before, and you're gonna leave in the middle of the cook to run errands. How does that make any sense?
You can see like the sun is out and it's like beaming right on the cooker. So I think it just got really hot. Like we're close to like 300 degrees at this point.
Another thing to keep in mind is the temperature gauge on the Weber Smoky Mountain is notoriously terrible. So for that cooker specifically, and every Weber Smoky Mountain that I've used, it usually shoots about 25 degrees lower than the actual temperature. So if the temperature was reading 300, really that pit was more like at 325.
You know, as you can see, the bark is pretty much set on these. If you look like right here, the fat is like pretty nice and yellow and soft to the touch. I like where the bark is, so I'm just gonna wrap them and then let them tenderize, and then the ribs will be ready for the sauce, and then we'll be done.
So right there, I just said that I liked where the bark was at. I didn't test the ribs for tenderness. I didn't test them for temperature. I just know in my head, okay, Mad Scientist Barbecue wraps his ribs. So even if these ribs are done or potentially overdone, I'm still gonna wrap them and cook them even longer, which is a terrible mistake. Never do that. Don't go by the recipe, go off of the meat.
All right, so these will be done in probably like an hour, but in the meantime, I'm gonna try to get the chicken ready as fast as possible because we're already at the 275 that I wanted to cook the chicken in. Okay, so again, I don't have a lot of time. I'm just gonna show you guys what I'm gonna do to each of the thigh and the drumstick.
If you're gonna prep the meat, just do it all in one sitting. Like the way I did it made no sense. So you're gonna trim the ribs, and then you're gonna wash everything, and then you're gonna wait 3 hours, and then while you're trying to scramble and get this meat onto the cooker, you're running late, you don't have a lot of time, now you have to prep some chicken. Just get all of your prep work done in the beginning, that way you can just pull it from the fridge and throw it on when it's time.
So then I'll show you guys how to do the thigh. So basically there's like this patch of fat right here that I just cut right next to, like that.
So to this day, I'm still a fan of what some people would probably consider over trimming chicken legs and also chicken thighs, because chicken legs and thighs are like super cheap. Sometimes you can get it for under $1 a pound. So, you know, I wanna make sure that when I'm making chicken, everything that I'm eating is just completely delicious, juicy meat. And at the end, there's nothing left but bones.
So basically what I'm gonna do is I have the racks of ribs on top. I have to take them off, put these at the bottom, and then put the racks back on top. So if you can come in and see the ribs, like bark has set like very nicely. Yeah, I'm just gonna sauce them up.
That sauce looks so nasty. And I know for a fact that this is homemade sauce because I have it in that red hot container. But regardless of what the sauce actually tastes like, the texture is just absolutely and completely wrong. So to get the right consistency, I usually cut my barbecue sauce with either apple cider vinegar, or I'll use some kind of combination of soy sauce or simple syrup just to get it to the right consistency so that it's more of a glaze than like a absolute cake frosting like it is in this video.
Okay, so off camera, I swapped the chicken because it was on the second grate. I moved it up to the top. It's been on for about an hour and 10 minutes. And yeah, so if you can see, like the skin is starting to kind of like dry out.
Wait, how is that dry? That doesn't look dry at all.
So basically I made this sauce right here, which is Italian dressing. So basically I'm using this to keep the chicken moist.
You know, in the earlier clip, I said that I'm short on time, and I'm mopping this chicken. So literally, if my plan is to mop this chicken throughout the cook, this is gonna take several hours. You know, chicken legs and chicken thighs, if you cook it at 325, 350, you can get these suckers done in like, you know, 2 hours, but I just took a 2-hour process and made it into a 5-hour process. But again, it's that whole thing. I think I'm following Malcolm Reed's recipe or something, and I'm so bent on following the recipe that I'm not thinking about, oh, my friends are gonna be here in an hour, I need to get this chicken done now.
I took the ribs off about 30 minutes ago, let them rest on this cutting board. But anyway, enough of the talk. I'm gonna go ahead and cut these and see what they look like. Kind of watch where you're cutting it. On
What?
On the underside, because that's where the bone is, so you can like really see.
Why am I better at cutting ribs back then than I am now? That is crazy. Did I get dumber?
Okay. That looks really dry.
Oh my God. I love how shocked I am that it came out dry. Oh my goodness. You left the pit for like, you left the pit rocking at like 325 for 4 hours, and you're like shocked that the ribs are dry at the end of it. Oh my gosh, that is so funny.
Okay, this side is okay. This side is pretty juicy.
Stop. It's not juicy. Stop it.
Oh wow, I just like wrecked the bark on that too.
You see, look, I'm calling it bark, but because I put so much seasoning on it, the bark was never able to develop. So if you look at it, it's like, you can just see the bare rib by itself. There is no bark on these ribs. It's just a frosting layer of barbecue sauce, rub, and salt. That's all that is. There's no bark on this thing.
Again, barbecue is to your liking. If you like dry ribs, fantastic, but also the great eraser in barbecue is barbecue sauce. So if the ribs are too dry, just soak them in barbecue sauce and everything will be a-okay.
That's wisdom right there, honestly. You know, I'm being hard on myself because first of all, it is me, but at the end of the day, like, just go outside, have fun, and you know, if you ruin it, put barbecue sauce on it, man. Like, no one's gonna tell the difference.
Incredibly dry, but it's got a nice crunch to it.
Crunchy should never be a positive feedback if you're making ribs. Like, you shouldn't be proud that you made the ribs crunchy. They should be tender, they should have a good bite, they should have good texture. Crunchy isn't on the spectrum of good, let alone really good, like I said.
I'm gonna cut these up and then put them on the table and then probably just film a few people to see what their reaction is to the rib. So again, you know, we live in California. A lot of people don't have too good of an idea of what good barbecue should taste like, so let's just see how good this does.
Yeah, see, that's a great attitude that I have. Like, and if I remember correctly, nobody complained about the barbecue. Nobody said, oh, this is the worst barbecue I ever had. Everyone seemed to have enjoyed it. So yeah, as long as you don't live in like the Carolinas or Texas or Kansas City, I mean, give your terrible barbecue to your friends and they'll probably think it's like the best thing they've ever had.
All right, so we skipped a lot of steps, but
I'm about to pull this off.
It took about 3.5 hours to get where it is, so I'm gonna pull them off.
No, that's way too little time, especially where the crust was at 1 hour and 10 minutes on top of mopping it every 20 minutes. Like, I don't think these chicken pieces are done.
I got the biggest chicken leg, I think.
Sorry, man, you got the biggest one. There's no way the collagen like broke down. I mean, you can kind of see it like on his chicken piece. Like, there's just so many like fibers hanging off of it. Like, there's no way that the collagen and tendons broke down enough to make it a pleasant bite for that leg.
I think it's good.
So polite. He hated it. You could just see it on his face how much he hated it. If you want to see how much better I've gotten at making ribs, then make sure to watch the next video on your screen right now.